Welcome to Artistic Adventures. We're going to continue our Steampunk Poison Ivy project, and in this video we're going to be working on some stocking boots and garter for her. Alright, so here she is. I've protected her face and hair for the next few parts because we're going to be working on costume and I didn't want to get anything messed up. So I just put some paper towel around it and some tape. Now I'm taking these panties that actually belong to my Blythe dolls and I colored them green using a permanent marker. And I'm going to attach these leather strips to the side because I want to make her a garter to attach to her boots. All right, so I just put some glue on there and then pinned it down, and we'll set that aside to dry for right now. Now for the boots, you may be surprised to know I'm going to actually use this material that's sheer. And I'm doing that because I want it to be sort of a background really for the vines and leaves I'm going to put on them. So that's why I'm using this material. Now it's not very easily folded, so that's why I pinned down the front there so I could make sure and cut out the back part evenly. If you try and fold it, it just flops open, so it was easier to do it this way. And now I'm measuring it. I cut it so that it actually went all the way up to her hip joint, I think. And what I'm going to do is I want the outside of the boot to be pointed up towards the hip and then the inner part to be lower and even. So I'm marking where I want that point to come up to. And I'm just going to cut this side of it at angles to come up to that point. And then on the back side, it'll just be straight across. You'll see what I mean in a minute. So I'm just taking the side and cutting from the point that will be at the bottom and then straight across in the back. And then from that point on the side, I'm going to cut down to where I made the across cut. All right, so now we got a point sticking up on one side. This will be on the outside. And then it's straight across on the inner side. And this will just come up to her mid-thigh. And then we're going to attach that to the garter. You'll see how this all works out. Yes, there's a plan here. All right, so just giving a little eyeball, and then we're going to sew up the back eventually, but for right now, it looks like it's measuring out right. So I'm going to do the same thing to the other side and cut it out to match this one, only making sure that I put the point opposite on the opposite side. So both of them will have the point on the outside of the thigh. This material is a little bit difficult to work with because it, like I said, it just doesn't fold well and it slides around, but pinning it really did help a lot. All right, so I got my two pieces cut, and then to make sure that when I sew it, it doesn't fall apart, I'm using frayed check, and then I'm going to put it on this aluminum foil to dry. And then when I sew it, you know, this is so sheer that it would be easy for the thread to just pull right out. So putting the fray check on helps a lot. And also it allows you to not have quite so thick a seam because you've got a seam that is very secure. This fray check comes out really fast, so you have to be careful. You don't just get it all over the material. And I keep a paper towel handy, and sometimes I have to blot the edges where it seems to drip out too fast. But it does work really well. It dries pretty fast. So I'm going to set that aside for right now and work on another part of her outfit that we're not going to finish in this video. This is actually going to be for the dress part, but I want to go ahead and do it and set it aside because it's glued and needs to dry. So I'm wrapping saran around her upper torso, coming all the way up under her chin, under her arms, and on her back. And then I'm just going to tape it down to hold it in place. And this is to protect it while I create the corset look that I want to have for her. I want it to be really molded to her body. So what I'm doing is taking this sheer dark green material as the base, and I'm doing a crisscross across her breast so that it comes down to a point between her breasts. So I'm using two pieces of fabric to do this. So you can see I'm just kind of crisscrossing it over there, and then I'm going to take another piece and crisscross on the other side. And just press that down into the glue. And then we're going to glue it down all the way around her. Just slather that glue on. And the saran protects her body and allows us to get it off of her, but at the same time provides a base for the material. This is very sheer material, but that's really what I wanted. I wanted this just to be the base. We're going to put some things on top of it, so it's not going to show, so you don't have to worry about how messy it is, or if you have to add another piece, like if you didn't have enough or whatever. So we're going to set her aside and let that dry while we continue working on our boots. All right, so we've got these with the fray check dried on the edges. Now I need a base. Now, if you've seen my other shoe videos, I use these molds to make polymer clay outer soles. And that's one way you could do this if you didn't have a pair of shoes. I'm actually going to make use of these shoes that are Monster High because I like the heel. It just sort of says, it looks like a thorn, so I'm thinking poison ivy and, plants. So I'm just going to cut off the top part. I don't really like these, factory made Monster High shoes, but sometimes you can make use of them in creating something new. So I just want to use this as a base. So I cut off the top and left the bottom portion and the heel, and that'll be the bottom of my see-through boots. Now, it's a little long, but I'm going to trim that off a little bit later on. Now to sew the sheer material together for the boot, we're just going to line up that back seam and make a small, maybe 1/8 inch seam around all the way to the toe. And when you're doing this, just make sure when you sew it that you're sewing it so that you're going to end up, when you turn it, with the points on the outside. And this is my little turner tool. You just stick that in, grab the toe, and pull it right out. Works really great. And now let's try it on for size. I want it to be loose. It's not a stretchy material. It is more of a boot than a stocking, although I'm calling it a stocking boot. And it looks like everything is fine. Now I want to put some leather up at the top of this to accent the point and also just to make it more steampunk because there's always leather there. And what you want to do here with this pointed area is make sure that you angle the edges as you glue them down so that they connect with the next part that you have to do and it looks seamless or fairly seamless. So I'm cutting that kind of at an angle because we're going to go up to that point. And then at the point, you want to cut that at an angle so that when you put the opposite side against it, it looks, nice and pointed. So I'm cutting that at an angle there. And then I'm going to glue this down. I did this in parts because you can't use one strip to go all the way around this since it has the pointed part. All right, so we're going to go ahead and glue that down at the top. And I spent a lot of this day waiting while glue dried. Now we're going to cut the opposite angle to meet up with that point at the top for the next piece. You can see those are cut at angles so that they fit together at the point, and then go ahead and glue that side down. Put a little glue on the edge too so that it glues to the other side. And we had set that aside to dry, and it just took so long doing this in pieces, and I went ahead and did it all off camera. And that's what we ended up with. That's the front. I'm sorry, that's actually the side. And so we're going to hook it to that garter that's coming down from the panties eventually. So to do that, I want to have a piece attached to this point area. And I'm using that same little leather strip. And I cut it at a point and had that extend a little bit below where that leather is on the stocking boot just for decorative purposes. And just glue that down. And it's longer than it needs to be, but we'll trim it later. And that's what that looks like. It also covers up the seam there, which is really nice. I'm using all sorts of tricks to cover up the seam. So I did both sides, and now I'm going to use these little tiny brads. It's just a round top with two little things sticking down that you can stick through paper. But I'm cutting the ends off and just using the little round part. They're sort of a nice brass color, which is so steampunk. And that one I needed more glue, so put a little bit more glue on there. I don't want it to show, but I want it to be enough to hold the brad down. And then just pick it up, and that gives us a little stud look there. I'm going to add all these little elements to make it steampunk. Lots of brass and leather and things like that. All right, so we've got the two basic forms of the stocking boots. And now I'm going to take this little tiny buckle, which you can barely see, and thread that through the strip of leather that's coming down from the panties. I'm doing that on both sides, and I can adjust that later. I just want to get those little buckles attached somewhere before I lose them. Now I'm going to take some green cord. This is a sort of a thin cotton cord, and I'm going to use this to make it look like a vine on top of the stocking boot. All right, so to start with, I'm going to glue the end down on the back of the boot near the seam of the actual seam of the stocking boot. And then we're just going to position this around to look like a vine. All right, so put a little of that E6000 on there and attach it right at the top where the leather meets the fabric. Now to hold this in place as we work, I'm going to use pins and just pin down the cord as we go to hold it in the shape that we want. Otherwise, it's not going to stay in place. So just start it on one side, pick up some fabric, take your pin over the top of the thread, and then pick up fabric on the other side, and that will hold it down. Okay, so that's the first part, and then we're just going to continue holding that down. And then I realized it was really going to help me to have something more solid under there as we move down than just holding it. So I decided to use a paintbrush handle. I don't want to use the doll because some of the glue can come through. I want to be able to do this and then pull it out and let it dry so we can just slip it on the doll's legs. So this made it easier to pin all the way down, and it helped me hold it in place so I could see where I was going. And then I'm just sort of randomly twirling this around as if this vine had grown up her leg. And that's, the image of poison ivy is she's kind of one with the plants. So this fits that she would have this sort of decoration coming up her legs. I could have done this with wire on her, like get some green wire and done it on her bare legs. That's another way to do something for poison ivy. But I wanted to do this stocking boot with this pointed side. I've been wanting to do this on a doll for a while, and I think it lends itself well to her because she's kind of hip and a villain, and it looks really sassy. So this is something you could do, with black for like a black material for dolls, or even just a sexy boot look. So all these techniques can be used in different ways. Just want to show you different things now and then so you're not watching the same old thing over and over. All right, so we've moved our way all the way down to the toe, and I left a little bit of the material because I'm going to just curl that around once this is all dry, make it just a little curled in, but I'm going to let it dry like this. And then I'm going to move over to the other boot, and I'm not going to try to be symmetrical with the design at all. I want it to look natural. And this is what we ended up with after they both sides dried. And I'm going to take the pins out now, and then we can decorate with the ivy leaves. So we're removing all the pins, and sometimes they get a little stuck because they got into the glue, but they came out pretty well. And we'll just try this on for size to make sure, everything is looking good. And so far, so good. We do still have those little raw ends of the green thread, but I'm going to curve those around and take care of those off camera because I'll have to wait for those to dry. So there we have our boots coming up on the sides, meeting the garter, and our vine-covered stocking boots. I think they turned out pretty cute. All right. So we're going to put the paintbrush back in there to help hold shape. And then using the leaves, I actually can cover up some of the seams in the leather. So I just pointed that one up and it's covering that side seam there. And you can do the same on the other seam on the other side as well. So you just want to place these randomly going in different directions so they look natural. And I've got two sort of, one's a lighter green and one's a darker green. And just sort of, like I said, be random about it because that's how plants grow. All right, so we've done both of those boots with the leaves and let them dry. And now we're going to attach the garter to the stocking boot. So I've got excess leather strips on both of these ends, and now we can position it, get it right, trim it, and then glue it down. So this is about where I want them to attach. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut that underneath part right at where the buckle comes down. And then for the part that comes out from the buckle, I'm going to cut that at a point because that will be visible. That's sort of like how the finished end would look if it was a real garter. And then we're going to measure that again. And I found I need to cut just a little more because it was covering up the brad. And then I'm going to put a glob of glue on the underneath of the buckle. Hold that down and then just hold it and let the glue dry. That did a lot of holding and gluing with this project all day long. Everything had to dry before I could move to the next step. And then we'll go on and do this on the other side. Make sure everything's dry. And then the next part, we're going to attach those soles that we cut off from the Monster High shoes. But first I wanted to just put a little bit of brown color using a marker. It says a permanent marker. Just want to add some brown color to that since it's steampunk, and to me it's sort of like brown is the ground and then the plants growing up from that. I can darken this also a little bit later, put a few more coats on. Now I found that this toe part was a little clunky because I want to turn it under and glue it to the boot. So I just clipped off that really chunky part at the end. I'm leaving enough now that I can turn it under. And then I glued that piece down with some E6000, and then I put a glob of that on the inside of the inner sole. I mean outer, actually that's the outer sole. And then we're just going to glue it to the bottom of the stocking boot. And it's probably going to glue to the foot as well. But this is an art doll. I'm not really planning to take this costume off of her. I'm going to fix her up and then she'll be Poison Ivy for the rest of her life, hopefully. Anyway, so anyway, I just had to glue that down and of course sit and hold it. I'm playing solitaire on my iPad while I wait. So I finished both sides, and this is what we ended up with. And this is I wanted to do this part first since it's sort of underneath the costume. But I think it turned out well. It's sassy looking and steampunky, and I can't wait to put the rest of the costume together and see how it looks with these boots. So I hope you enjoyed that video and learning how to make stocking boots and just a few other techniques. We have lots more to come with this series. We're going to work on rest of our costume next, and then move on to some other things. So I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe. I don't want you to miss a thing. Thanks, and bye.